So our first presenter today is Douglas Stubbs, who was born and raised in Mexico in the Mormon colonies. My wife and I served as a mission president, presided over a mission, and we had a missionary from the Mormon colonies. We'll have to get together on this. I'm sure you know him. He currently lives in Missouri among a diverse and remarkable community of Latter-day Saints from various restoration traditions who have learned to love each other and work together despite their differences. He is a father of 9 wonderful children and husband to 2 beautiful women. He loves God. He loves to learn of his ways because he knows that his ways are always good. His presentation is titled, "The Heavens Declare the Glory of God." Love it. All right, with that, Douglas Stubbs, come on up.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very grateful to be here. It was a long travel to get here, but I'm very grateful. I was blessed with the invitation from Josh Erickson to come and participate in this. First of all, I ask interest in your faith and prayers that I can share things in a way that'll be a benefit and a blessing to you guys and to all of those who are listening via the internet. I will say that just getting started out that the first time I put this thing together, I had 196 slides, and the class was 4 hours or 3 hours and 45 minutes long, and I had to shorten it. The first time I presented it, I had about half my people leave, so I'm like, okay, we got to make that shorter. So I cut it in half. And then when Joshua told me I had about 50 minutes, I cut it in half again. So realize that I'm just going to hit a lot of highlights throughout. I also have not timed myself since I've cut it down, so I hope that we can make it work. I'll do my best. All right, sounds good. So one other thing I want to bring up is I want to introduce you guys to how this subject was first brought up to me, or how I got introduced to this subject. Some of you guys know that we are building a temple in Missouri. And in the celestial room, they have a big dome. And we were talking about how we should finish out this dome and praying about it. And we felt like we should do some stars in there. I presented the idea of doing some stars just as a starry night kind of a look. And I was asked by someone, they said, maybe you can do a little bit of studying on the stars and just see what you can find that might be interesting, I guess. So they gave me 1 week to study something out so I could present something, right? So a week later, I just presented. I said, hey, I found out that there's a ton on it, but I'm gonna need some more time. So I asked them for 3 months to do some more studies, and I would put a PowerPoint together. And that 3 months ended up turning into 9 months, 8 months and a little bit before I actually even got my PowerPoint finished, because there was so much material to cover. And it was a very new subject to me, and every person I've talked to about it has actually mostly had never heard of it. And so I find it a pretty fascinating subject. But anyway, it's titled, we have a lot of places in scriptures that talk about stars and talk about their purposes. Anyway, I want to go ahead and start skipping through a couple slides. And we'll just show you guys some things. I bought a program where I could see outer space from my laptop. And there's just some pictures I took that are pretty cool. Go ahead and skip through a slide there. Couple of them. Anyway, you can't really see it, but that's a galaxy, and that's a galaxy. And we got a galaxy over there. And, this is by Aries Head. So it's one of the constellations. Go ahead and skip through now. We can turn the lights off. You guys can see better. North America Nebula. You can kind of see how you got the Gulf of Mexico here. And anyway, you have a lot of these kind of things out there. It's pretty cool. Nothing to do with my class necessarily, but pretty awesome. Let's go ahead. So stars, what are they? Can anybody here tell me what stars are? Like the balls of gas burning millions of miles away, right? That's what Timon and Pumbaa had to say about it. I have a different idea. Let's go to the next slide here. So I think they're the original connect the dots. That's where that game come from. Okay, we can. So let's go ahead and skip the next slide here. So we find in the Bible, God says, let there be lights in the firmament of heaven to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And so we have like the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets all the celestial bodies that we can look at, and they're all there for a purpose. And, you know, we know which ones give us day and night. You know, we have the sun that separates the day and night, and we know that, obviously. And we have seasons, which our moon gives us our seasons. We have the different phases of the moon, and all the holy days are built off of the moon cycles. Anyway, they give us days and years, but we have one that's for signs that most people don't really think about. Okay. And so what I want to present to you guys today is that the stars are given to us for signs. Okay. So go to the next slide. Okay. So this is my act class. The heavens declare the glory of God. And we find in Psalms 119, it says that prophetic constellations. Let's go to the next slide. Let's see. So this is what Psalms 1-5 says, or 19, 1-5, right? The heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after the day, they pour forth speech, and night after night, they reveal knowledge. Without speech or language, without a sound to be heard, their voice has gone into all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. So that's an interesting thing, right? It's talked about the heavens are declaring the glory of God, but they do it without making a sound, without ever mentioning a word. But yet it's to all nations, all languages, everybody. And so I thought it was a really beautiful idea and view. So this is where we're building off of. Let's go ahead, next slide. So it says, this is another scripture, Isaiah 40:26. Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these stars, the one who leads forth their host by number. He calls them all by name. Because of the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one of them is missing. So this is a key point we're building around. He calls them all by name. And that's a very interesting thing. You know, well, let's go to the next slide. I think I bring it up in the next slide, right? Yeah, he telleth the number of the stars, and he called them all by their names. We have other places that, and I don't think I have them in here. He says that we cannot number them, but he knows them all by name, you know? Let's go ahead, next slide here. So what's the oldest book in the Bible? Okay, the oldest book in the Bible is unsurprisingly found in the Old Testament. And most people would assume it's in Genesis because it details the creation of the world. However, it is believed that the oldest book in the Bible is smack in the middle of the Old Testament, and it is the book of Job. The book of Job is estimated to have been written in the time of the patriarchs about 2100 BC. So why is this important to our subject? Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide here. Okay, this is important because most people want to attribute the names and the meanings of the stars to the Greeks, which were about 1000 BC. This is understandable because being that they have mostly kept them alive. However, we should keep in mind that the Greeks did not make the stars. They did not name them. They only used what God made and made it ugly. There's no information, to my knowledge, that can pinpoint where the names of the stars and constellations came from, but it is quite interesting to note, however, that the Hebrews, the Aztecs, the Babylonians, the Norsemen, the Egyptians, the Chinese all recognize the same constellations with essentially the same meanings and the same stars and their basic meanings. So underneath a pile of myth and corruption and idolatry are some invaluable truths to be found. So this was a really interesting thing to me. The one I don't have in there is the Mayans. The Mayans actually, they have on, anybody here been to Cancun? Yeah, anybody here check out the pyramids in Cancun? Okay, they have some in Palenque, Chiapas, Palenque, and they actually have constellations there, and they have different things in their museum that actually show they knew about stars and they knew about the same forms. But you have Mayans who are all on this side of the world, and Greeks and everyone who was on that opposite side of the world, but they have the same essential meanings and names on stars and names on constellations. So where did all this come from? What was the common ancestry for all this information, right? Okay, next slide. Was that last slide the one I barely read? Yeah, no? Yeah, okay, sorry. Next slide. Here we go. Okay, so when God talks to Job, the reason this was important about Job being the oldest book in the Bible, because God talks to Job and he says this in Job 38. He says, canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? So, anybody know what Pleiades is? Pleiades, anybody? Yeah? Okay, we have a few people. Pleiades is a constellation. It's a really small constellation. A lot of people think of it as a Little Dipper. It's not a Little Dipper, but it kind of looks like a Little Dipper, but it's tiny. Okay, what about Orion? Everyone knows about Orion. Orion's belt, right? Okay. Mazzaroth. Can anybody tell me what the Mazzaroth is? I know Anna can. Anybody else? We're going to explore that word in just a second here. And Arcturus, that's the name of a specific star in the constellation of Bootes. So the idea here is that we have certain stars and constellations that are brought about all the way in the book of Job, which was 1,200 years before the Greeks even came into existence. So, so most people think of the stars, they think about Greek mythology. And so I'm showing you guys it's not necessarily, it was before that. The Greeks got it and twisted it. Next slide. So what is Mazzaroth, Pleiades, Orion, Arcturus? What is God talking about? Next slide here. Okay, moving on. Next slide. Okay, the word Mazzaroth occurs twice in Scripture. First in Job here, and second in Kings there, right? The word means separated, divided, or apportioned, and it refers to the allotted spaces given to the 12 signs in the circle of the zodiac. Okay, so most people think of this, well, next slide here. So most people think of the zodiac as strictly Greek and strictly, well, bad. I'll say it like that. Okay. So what is the zodiac? The word zodiac is an interesting word, right? The zodiac are the signs that mark the 12 divisions in the year. And so what I want you guys to start connecting here is that we're going to start building off the number 12, and there's 12 months in a year, more or less. Okay, because I'm going to show you guys how this ties in. Okay, so there's 12 divisions in the year. Okay, it is true that astrology uses the signs of the zodiac in a corrupt form, but it's not true that astrology invented or originated them. A large part of the evil that we have in the world is a perversion or a twisting of that which is good and true. So the word zodiac itself comes from the Greek word zodiakos, which means a circle. The root zoad means a way or path, a going by steps. So an example would be like a clock, right? It starts at 12 o'clock and then it ends at 12 o'clock, right? So that would be a zodiac or a zodiakos, right? Zoad. Or the moon cycles. It starts with the new moon, it goes all the way through a full moon, then back to a new moon, right? Or a fall and spring equinox, right? Every year it starts at one point and gets to that point again. So anything you have that starts at one point and gets to that same point again is built off the word zoad, which is where the word zodiac comes from. Okay, so next slide. So let's get into the meat of the subject. The idea that I would like to present to you is this, that we are told that the stars were created by God, named by God, and created for his purposes. So the question is, what are his purposes? We are given the idea in Genesis 1:14 that the stars are for signs. And Christ alludes to the idea, and we can read this in Matthew 16. He says that looking at the evening to see the signs of the time, looking at the sky. Oh, thank you. You said here. To see the signs of the time. He says, and then we have in Revelation, right? Another wonder appeared in heaven. Okay. What is the meaning of all this? And what could we learn from the stars? If God really named the stars and placed them all where they are, to what end did he do this? I answer, it is to serve as a witness and a prophetic outline of the purposes of God in the salvation of his people. So that's where we're going with this. Let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so David could pinpoint, I should make a clarification here before I move on much farther. I've read 4 books on the subject of the stars, but I have also pulled from all of them and then made up my own version, because none of them to me fit in very good with my Hebrew understanding of the scriptures and stuff. So what I'm presenting you guys is mostly original, and but if anybody can find the information, I would be glad to hear from you guys to improve on it. But anyway, okay, so this is my thought here, right? David could pinpoint the well-known bright stars and contemplate their meanings. In his native language, Hebrew, the names of the stars were terms that were commonly used in the messianic prophecies. So it is in the original names of the stars and the constellations that the gospel first becomes apparent. Okay, so I'm going to start going through short examples. I'm going to show you guys how this works. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so some of you guys know some of these names. They're names of stars. Okay, Spica, Arcturus. We talked about Arcturus, Pulox, which is on constellation of Orion. Okay, you got Altair and Sirius. That's the closest star we have to us. Procyon and Vega and whatever. These are names of stars, and these are their Hebrew translations, according to Francis Rolleston. Okay, she wrote a book called the Mazzaroth, and that's where I got all of the names from the stars that I got. I just pulled them out of her book. So if something's wrong with them, that's where it comes from. Don't blame me. I just copied and pasted what her work that she did in the 18 whatevers. Okay, so anyway, so this is how I told you guys I had to eliminate a ton of slides. The way I had it originally was I actually got a picture of each constellation. So this star has this name. This star has that name. They line up in this kind of a way. You see what I'm saying? I had to skip all that because there was a ton of information. So what I did on this one is I'm just giving you guys, right now I'm giving you a sample of how I come up with my information and what I'm about to present. Okay. And later on, all I'm going to do is read you this half of it. Right. And if you guys want to know the other half of the story, I'm glad to share the other information with you guys. Okay. But I did have to highlight it if you want to say that. So Spica, which is in the constellation of Virgo. Okay. That word Spica in its original Hebrew means the branch. And then Arcturus means he comes. Pollux, who comes to suffer. Altir, the wounded. Cyrus, the prince. Elnath, slain. Procyon, the redeemer. Vega, he shall be exalted. So these are just names of stars in their Hebrew language. Directly, translate to English, and these are their translations. So let's move on here. Here's a few more. Okay, star name Rigel means the foot that crushes. Taliman, the heretofore and the hereafter. Betelgeuse, the coming of the branch. Deneb, the judge. Alioth, the goat or sin offering. Belantrix is swiftly destroying. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'll get to this in a minute. Let's go ahead and move on. I'll explain here what we're doing. So I'm willing to bet that you could think of scriptures that align with the names on these stars. Well, let's get into it, and I'll show you the little bit I understand how it works. So moving on. The zodiac. So that's moving on. Okay, so here we go. This is how we're going to start. So you have 12 months in a year, and that's what those numbers are here. Okay, and you have your 12 primary constellations. Okay, there are 12 signs or primary constellations in the zodiac, marking the 12 divisions of time in a year. The Gregorian calendar starts in January, which most of the books I read, they want to start in January here. Okay. January. However, in the Hebrew calendar starts in the spring, starting with the first new moon after spring equinox. So about March or April, which ends up being in this part of the story. In trying to understand the gospel and the stars, it's important to start at the beginning of the Hebrew year. You can imagine that if you try watching a movie, let's say, and this movie follows from one point to the next, to the next, to the next, but you start in the middle of the movie, you start at the wrong place, and then you work your way all back around, you're not gonna get the story in context. And so that's one of the primary things that I changed based on all the books that I read. All the books that I read, they started it here, the story. And so the story had a different outcome. So what I've done, I start the story here, and it has to me, a better outcome that lines with scripture. Okay. We will start on the first division of time, or the first Hebrew month, which is Nisan. Okay. In the constellation of Virgo. So let me expound on this a little bit. What I did on the dome in the temple there that we're making in Missouri is I lined it. I pretty much organized it to where it's a stellar clock, right? To where I know that on March 20th, what happened March 20th? Can anybody tell me? Equinox. You have March equinox, right? So what I did is I picked one day of of the equinox, and I lined it up to where the first star that you see on March equinox is Spica, which is the first star that I showed you guys over there. Okay. And so from there, the story builds backwards. Or I say build backwards, in other words, it builds opposite the way that most people would think it goes clockwise, but actually builds that way. So this star, Spica, is the very first one, and it rises at 9 o'clock on the 21st of March, 20th, 21st of March, every year. And so I had to pick a point to start from, and it made most sense to start there because it was at the very beginning of the year. So, I'm going to explain to you how this whole thing is going to work. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide here. Okay, so each of the 12 signs, which each one of these is a sign, right? Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricornus, Aquarius, okay? Each of these primary constellations represent a division in time. In ancient times, there were more constellations recognized than 12, the 12 signs of the zodiac. So, okay, each of the 12 signs or primary constellations of the zodiac are accompanied by 3 other constellations called deacons, making 48 constellations total. So we have one constellation here, Virgo, let's say, and it has to help tell this story, it has 3 other constellations. Okay. And so you have to pull the names off that whole section of the sky to get that part of the story. And then you're going to pull the names off this whole section of the sky, and then that whole section of the sky. Right. So you're not only pulling these little names off right here, you're pulling off a whole section of stars in that area. Okay. One thing else I want to bring up with this, let me see. Making 12. Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and move on here. So the story in the sky is broken up into 3 sections. Okay. And so I told you guys at first we had Virgo, let's just say, and it had 3 deacons. And so it accompanies a part of the sky that's that big. Okay. Well, that tells a piece of a story, but all of these together tell a whole section of the story. Right. So you could think of like each star that I'm going to name is just a sentence or a word or an understanding. Right. But then that whole piece here, sorry, this one here gives you a word, the whole section gives you a sentence, and this whole thing gives you a chapter. That's kind of the way you can think about it. Okay. Everybody understanding me? Am I moving too fast? Okay. All right, moving on. If I'm moving too fast or something, please slow me down. I think we're working fine. Okay. So the way this is put together, we will name some of the stars from each primary constellation and their corresponding deacons in order to get an overview of the story in the stars. Note that all of the star names that are used were taken from the book The Mazzaroth by Francis Rolleston, originally published in 1832. It should also be noted that although I have referenced Francis Rolleston in this work, I have changed the point at which she started the story. In my opinion, this creates a better flow and a better understanding of the gospel in the stars. And I kind of mentioned that just a minute ago. Okay, so I'm going to try this one out, and then if it works, we're going to keep moving forward. Okay, but it's from here, it can go really slow or really fast, depending on how we can work with this. Okay, so like Virgo, I mentioned that Virgo is the primary constellation, and then you have Comma, Boots, and Centaurus, and these are the 3 deacons that are associated with the main primary constellation Virgo. The reason that these are primary constellations is okay. Anybody here knows what the ecliptic is? Yeah, we have 2 hands. Okay, 3 hands. Okay, so the ecliptic is the point. Let me. Mr. Slide Guy, jump me back a couple slides. Go back, go right here. Okay, so you see this little circle right here, this blue one? That's the ecliptic, okay? Now, this one that's super interesting is that along this ecliptic is where the sun and moon rise. It's also all of the planets follow the ecliptic, okay? So what that means is that at any given point, day or night, your planets will be touching or inside one of the primary constellations, or the sun or the moon, right? So if you can look at, let's just say this last eclipse we had on the 8th of April, the eclipse happened right on that little tiny dot right there. That tells you I'm nervous. You see my hand shaking? Okay, so the eclipse happened right on the ecliptic on Pisces, okay? And but all the planets consistently, they're running across the ecliptic, and so they're always in or right next to a constellation, which is really interesting. Okay, so that's what makes these ones the primary constellations. Let me I'll just expound on this a little bit. We talked about in Revelations, it talks about another wonder appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and the stars above her head, right? Everybody acquainted with that? So you could think of it, you had the woman, which is Virgo, and she was clothed with the sun, which tells you the sun was actually on top of her, which means you couldn't have seen her throughout the night, right? Because she was clothed with the sun, right? So the idea is that you wouldn't actually be able to see her when this happened in the nighttime, because the sun was on top of her, but the moon was under her feet, and she had different stars above her head, which is, we could talk about it. But the idea is that you have signs like that and wording like that in the scriptures that's really interesting. But the idea is the sun passes through each one of these every year. The moon passes through each one of every month. I don't know about that last one. Don't hold me to that. Anyway, but the planets are shuffling through all of them. So anyway, now let's jump forward back to where I was. I wanted to clarify that right here. So all I did is I got the word Virgo in the different languages, which was Hebrew, Noric, Chinese, all these different things. And all I did, I didn't give you guys actual names that I'm translating. I just giving you guys the translation. That makes sense to everybody? Okay, so it's all I'm going to do is read them more or less in order to the way they rise in the sky. That's what I'm doing. Okay, and so you're just going to see a lot of commas because that's a virgin, right? Virgo, that's what it means, right? It has another name, the station of the desired. So that's just the name of another star in that constellation, the station of the desired. And so all I do is I have them in order, right? One at a time. And so you're gonna see a lot of commas, lots of dots, nothing capitalized because of, I just give you just names of stars. Okay, that's the way we're going. So Virgo, a virgin, station of the desired, who carries the branch, 2 ears or spikes of corn. And so that don't really mean much to anybody when you think of those are the names that we have from the constellation Virgo. It don't really tell you much anything, but the whole, so that's just, like I say, each one of those stars is a word, but when you get that whole sentence together, it's going to start telling you something. Okay. Comma, okay. It's anyway, I'll just tell you the different names we have on it, right? I'll just read it the way it is. It's a pure virgin or one who bears the bright. Names of the infant. So comma in the way that's drawn, like on the Egyptian pyramids, they have a set of constellations inside the Egyptian pyramid. I don't remember the name of that. But Virgo is the virgin, and comma is a woman holding a baby, right? And so these are just the different names you find. So the names for the woman is the pure virgin or who bears the bright, and the names that are on the baby, the longed for, the son who cometh, the united, the glorious, who shall come down, shall have dominion, the deliverer who cometh. Okay, so everybody following how we're doing this? I want to make sure we're not leaving anybody behind. If we can do it, I'm just going to go ahead and start going through it. Okay, Boots, next constellation, the Guardian. That was the star Arcturus. I told you guys that there was Arcturus that's talked about in the book of Job. That word Arcturus means the guardian. Okay, so you have the Guardian, the keeper, the pierced, being sent forth as a dart, the coming forth as an arrow, who separates, who bruises, treading underfoot, the guardian of Arctos. Okay. Centaurus, the despised, the pierced, the sin offering, the mediator, the heretofore and the hereafter, the king. Okay. So now you can get an idea a little bit that it's talking about Christ to one degree. Now it's talking about how he's going to come through a virgin. He's going to be the one who's bright. He's the one who is longed for. He's the glorious. He's coming down. He's going to have dominion. He's the deliverer. He gets pierced. He's being sent forth. He's bruised. We talked about. Again. He's pierced. He's despised. You can start seeing a connection of a person that's being talked about. Right? Okay. Thoughts or questions? Just so that nothing. All right. Moving on. Okay. Here goes. Next constellation, Libra. Okay. The scales. Libra in Spanish, okay, is pound, right? And the idea, you can get the idea from pound of scales or weights or measures. And the constellation for Libra is a scale, okay? That's what it is if you see the picture of it. And so different names on that. The scales, purchase, redemption, gain, station of probation, the purchase or the price which is deficient, the price which covers, heaped up high, redemption of the conflict. Okay. The cutting off, the cross, there's only one, although there's several stars on it, we only have the name for one of them, one of those stars, and it means the cutting off. The victim, okay, to be slain or destroyed, to be slain, the victim. Corona, a kingly crown, ornament of jewels, the shining. Okay. So on this one is pretty interesting. So you start getting an idea that you had this figure who was going to come, but talked about earlier, he was going to be born of a virgin. He was going to have these different things, but the idea is that he pays a price which is deficient. We cannot pay it, and he pays the price which covers, and he heaps it up high. So okay, moving on here. Next slide. Okay, Scorpius, Okay. The scorpion or the conflict, wounding him, attack of the enemy, cleaving in conflict, the perverse, the cleaving as in conflict, the enemy, the wounding. Okay. Serpents, we have the accursed, the reptile, encompassing. Oshifas, right? The serpent holder, in the serpent, treading underfoot, bruised, the wounding, contending, the head of him who holds. And Hercules, we have the strong, the wounding, the punishing, the sin offering, the branch, the kneeling, head of him who bruises, the head of the desired, who heals, who comes to suffer. All right. So let's move on next slide here. So this slide gives us a summary. No, it don't give a summary yet. I like one thing. Sorry. Yeah. So Sagittarius, sorry, I was thinking too far ahead. Sagittarius, okay, the riding of the bowman, the archer, the arrow, the going forth, the gracious, delighted in, the pleasant, who comes forth, the purchaser. The long serpent or Draco or dragon, the punished enemy, the head of the serpent, who is to be destroyed, the fraudful. The eagle, the coming straight, growing, sent forth to smite, he shall be exalted. Altar, the completing, finished, perfect. Those are just all the names of the stars. So you remember when I was showing you guys that the sky was divided into 3 primary sections. So this, all of everything we just went through was one section of the sky from Virgo all the way to Sagittarius, and all their deacons in order, more or less. So let's jump to the next slide here, and it'll give us a summary. Okay, so that I'm calling that the first act. So in the first act, the signs of Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius and their deacons portray 4 aspects of prophetic truth concerning the person and the work of the coming Redeemer. So first, we see the manhood that he would assume, right? He'd be born of a virgin, he'd be desired, he would come, he was longed for, you know, it's the manhood he would assume, the price he would pay, which was in Libra, the battle he would fight, and the victory he would win. Right. So in this first act, or the first section of the sky, Christ is portrayed as a suffering savior, delivering man from the penalty of sin. It is through him alone that we are justified. So when I think about this as a prophetic constellations, the way I think about it is, this was people, you could say, like before, people in Moses' day, looking forward to the promise that someone's going to come who's going to pay a price that we're not able to pay, and they're going to be able to ultimately, he's going to justify us, if we want to say that. Anyway, and as the story builds, we'll start seeing more and more connections to everything. But so that's the end of the first act. Okay, did everybody follow how we did that? Yeah, good. All right, moving on. Let's move on. So in the second act, we look at 4 more signs. We're going to look at Capricornus, Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. We will consider the constellation and the star names to show the results of the mission of Christ and his redeeming work. Okay, so this next section we're moving into has now, so the last one, it started with where he was born, and that situation, it died with him being killed. And so this next one's going to start with the mission he played while he was here on earth. Okay, more or less. Okay, let's move on here. Okay. Capricornus, the judge or Lord cometh, the sacrifice comes, the destroying, the sacrifice slain, the slaying, the record of the cutting off, the destroying, the bright, he cometh down, wounded in the heel, the wounding, the piercing, the fish. Okay. Don't know about you guys, but I can see a lot of Christ's thoughts or his story in here. Let's move on here. Okay. Aquarius. Okay.
Just to be clear, so all of these names are of the stars, the individual stars in these constellations.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So just these names, that's why I say, like, you know, the branch, that was the name of one star. Who carried, that's a different star. The water, that's a different star. Right. Right. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to keep going out here. So if I probably should have made this in the beginning to clarify, but I have pictures here that give me, to me, that were pictures that represented what the stars were saying, more or less. Okay, so if you guys look at the pictures, to me, it was just a way of kind of summarizing what that story in the stars is saying. Aquarius, the pourer out, the vessel of pouring out, who goeth and returneth, the mouth of the fish, the branch, who carries the water, who causes to overflow, who goeth and returneth, coming quickly, joyfully. The judge, he shall come down, glorious, shining forth, flying swiftly, who goes and returns. Okay, so all these are giving you ideas of what Christ, but Aquarius, if you see Aquarius in the sky, what's he doing? Can you tell me? He's pouring out water, right? And where's he pouring water to? Anybody know? Okay, it's pouring water into a fish's mouth. Okay, and that's what this is, right? Mouth of the fish. Okay, I can't think of the name on that star, but the fish of the mouth of the fish. But we have a lot of scriptures that talk about the idea that. Well, let me just jump back to this. Christ, he came and he talks about, I'll make you fishers of men, right? And then he did his first miracle has to do with gathering fish, and he does several miracles about feeding people with fish, right? And then what was a sign for Christians when they were trying to pull Christians in? It was a sign of the fish. Why the fish so much? See what I'm saying? It's interesting that we just have that kind of a story here a little bit. Okay, so the other thing we have that's pretty cool on this slide particularly, right, is Christ talks about, come to me and I will give you water, you'll never thirst again. And we actually find that with Aquarius, he's pouring water out into the mouth of the fish. Okay, we have in Capricornus, let me think. Oh, let me think where it was. Anyway, I think it was my last slide. Capricornus. What's Capricornus? Can you get Capricorn? What I think that's how you say it, Capricornus, right? What is that figure the way we have it in the sky? Huh? It's a goat. It's a goat and what? It's a goat and a fishtail, right? And the story with that whole thing is the fact that Christ was you could say the lamb, and in him dying there was new life in the fish. And from after that point, you start having all the fishes, right? And it's interesting because in Christ's death we do have new life. Right, so the fish represent actually those who have been converted to his ways and who have new life in him. That's actually what the story of this guy brings out. But anyway, let's go to the next slide here. Okay, Pisces. Okay, the fish of him that cometh, the united, the upheld. Okay, the band. So anybody know about these fish? What the Pisces is, two fish, and they're tied together with a big rope. Right, every night. Okay. So, anyway, so you have the fish. I already read those. The band, the bridle. He cometh. Andromeda, the chained, the afflicted. So you talk about these fish. They are chained. They're the actual figure of the fish. They are tied together with a rope. And then Andromeda just explains the story more. Andromeda in the sky is a woman, but she has chains on her. She is dirty and ugly, and she's having a hard time surviving, kind of thing. She's chained, she's afflicted, she's weak, she's wounded, from the grave, broken down, struck down. Okay. And so you have the people of Christ, you could say, that are still bound and struggling under sin, although they've been converted, is the idea. Then you have Cephas, the Redeemer, the branch, coming quickly, coming in a circle, treading underfoot, who bruises. Okay. Let's go to the next slide here. Aries. Okay. The lamb, the ram, the gentle, merciful, exalted, chief, lifted up, the bruised or wounded, the binding. Now, Cassiopeia is the opposite of Andromeda. Okay. Cassiopeia is the same woman, but now she's enthroned. She's beautiful. She's freed. The branch, she's set up or established. She's seated. Right. She's waiting now. Cetus, right? The bound or chained enemy, the rebel, overthrown. Pursues. Okay, the breaker who breaks, who carries away the head of the enemy, the trodden underfoot, the demon, the subdued, the evil spirit. All right. These kind of give you the idea of, to me, what all is saying, right? You must be divorced from your sin, or you cannot be married to Christ, right? No longer a slave to sin. Or okay. Let's jump back. I'm gonna go next slide. Okay, so that was the end of the second act. So in the second act, attention was drawn to four other signs, which was Capricornus, Aquarius, Pisces, and Aries. These stars and constellations explain not so much the Redeemer as a person, but more the results of his redeeming work. Okay, in these four signs, Christ is portrayed as the glorified blesser who delivers man, okay, from the power of sin. So the first time he removed them from the penalty of sin. Okay, and the next time this in the second one here removes you from the power of sin. Sin no longer has a hold on you, right? I'm no longer a slave to sin. That's why I brought that up. Let's go to our next one. Okay, so Taurus, we're starting the next part of the sky. So Taurus, the bull, coming, ruling, who saves mightily, the accumulation, the congregation of the ruler, the congregated, belonging to the judge, the leader or governor, the center or foundation, the abundance. Orion, okay, the coming of the branch, the coming forth as a light, the mighty, the ruler, the prince, the wounded, who treadeth underfoot, hastily coming, dividing, bruised. The river of the judge, flowing, water, bent down, the after part of the river, the mouth, the going forth. Okay. Auriga, the shepherd or goat, the goat or atonement, the wounded in the heel, she goat or you, right? The kid, the flock of goats, band or chain of the goats are used. So you can start, like I say, to me, you start getting an idea of what we're talking about here and think about where we're going. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Gemini. Okay. The united or twinned. So Gemini is who's Gemini in the sky? Right. It's the two people, the two guys in the sky, you could say, and they are kind of have the same, mostly the same figures, two people, and they're holding hands. Okay. But Gemini is the word that comes from twins, gemelos, which is twins in Spanish. Okay. The stars on it, right, are the united or twinned, united as in brotherhood. The branch, palm branch, the seed, the bearing or branch or club, coming to suffer, treading underfoot, hurt, afflicted, bearing an arrow, the branch, ruler, or judge. Okay. This is a snake. Anyway, the enemy of him that cometh, the mad, the bound, the deceiver, the enemy of what cometh. Cyrus. The prince, who shall come, the prince or the chief of the right hand, prince, the mighty, the glorious, the ruler, the leader or chief, the bright, the shining. Procyon, the redeemer, the prince or chief of the left hand, who completes or perfects the burden bearing forth others. Okay, let's jump to the next slide here. Cancer. Most people think of cancer, right? Cancer is the crab that has its two things. Based on everything that we find, so the idea is with the crab, it has the reason they have as a crab is the idea that it's a holding place. A crab bites and don't hardly let go. So it's a place of protection. It's a place where God grabs you and he holds on to you. That's this next part of the story. And you can kind of think of that. You're in a protected or walled city, you know. Cancer is a crab who holds or binds the cattle folds, holding, encircling a multitude of offspring, the kids or lambs, the sheltering, the assembled thousand lifted up. I like to think of that one just the way it is. You know, it's encircling, it has a multitude of offspring, it's a shelter place for thousands. You know, it's a protective place where you come into God's protection. Okay. Ursa Minor, which is the Little Dipper. Okay. Waiting for him who cometh, the calves, the redeeming assembly, the turned or riding on, assembled, center of the Mazzaroth. That's that word. Center of the Mazzaroth, by the way, that is Polaris. Okay. Ursa Major, the assembled herd of animals, wealth, the sheepfold, daughters of the assembly, wealth or multitude, the flock, the purchased, separated, visited, guarded, numbered. The company of the travelers, the multitude, the possession of him who cometh, the desired, the branch. Argo is a ship. And it's interesting because in the whole story, if you were to get the whole story, this ship has a cargo. It's the possessions of him who cometh, and what it is his lambs that are taking them to the assembled place, the protected place where God's watching over. Okay, let's go to your next slide. Okay, so this is the last slide of in the scars in the circle of the zodiac. Right, so Leo, the Lord who cometh down quickly. The lion who rends, the treading underfoot, the punished, the shining forth, the joining, the exaltation. Okay. Leo is the lion, by the way. Hydra is that snake. Okay. The abhorred, the separated, the serpent, the separated, piercing of the deceiver. Crater, okay, which is that cup. It just says the cup. that we have on it. Corvus, which is that bird, okay? The accursed, the raven, the joining together, piercing of the raven. The story here is the fact that that ultimately that this lion kills that snake and the wrath of God is poured out, and that snake, that bird devours that snake. And so let's move on to the next slide. So in this third act, we find that the serpent, the enemy of all righteousness, is destroyed and the lion is exalted. We can see in this the complete eradication of sin. In these last four signs, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo, Christ is portrayed as the reigning judge, delivering man from the presence of sin. Right? So the first one, he delivered you from the penalty of sin. The second section, he delivered you from the power of sin. And right now, he delivered you from the presence of sin. He took you to a safe place, and he destroyed the enemy. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is how the summary here, the way we write this up, right? Recap. The first four signs, I told you guys, right? Christ is portrayed as a suffering savior, delivering man from the penalty of sin. In the middle signs, Christ is portrayed as a glorified blesser, delivering man from the power of sin. And in the last four signs, Christ is portrayed as a reigning judge, delivering man from the presence of sin. All right, so that's how it started. We started here, and we read all those stars with Virgo, and then Libra, and the Scorpio, and Sagittarius, and all the way around. Okay, and so that's mostly how it goes. Do I have another slide? I think I do. I think I have one more. Okay, so we can see through that in reality, you know, the heavens really do declare the glory of God, right? And they show forth his handiwork, right? And to me, it's really cool to really think of the stars, the way they're organized is that they, if you understood them, you know, I would assume that every person here would agree that God has a purpose in everything he creates, right? So to me, it's been a really cool testimony and really cool, a beautiful thing to see that God's ways are showed. If you can analyze them, you know, that his gospel is showed out throughout all nations, all kindreds, all tongues, all people. Anybody who wants to listen, the idea is there, right? And God uses all things to speak to us. Anyway, I thought that was a beautiful thing, but that was the end of my thing. So.
All right.
Do you have questions?
Questions here. Here's one. And you can start reading
Okay.
just to take a look at it.
We have a problem though. I do not know how to read cursive.
Here, let me see if I can help. I understand.
I'm not saying I can't read cursive. I'm just gonna be really slow at reading cursive.
So
okay, can I share the 4 books that you read and done the research on? Yeah, so I read The Mazzaroth from Francis Ralston. Then there's another book called The Gospel in the Stars. Another one is called The Heavens Declare the Glory of God. And another one's called Prophetic Constellations. Right. So those are the 4 books. Okay, you have The Mazzaroth. And you have another one called The Gospel in the Stars. You have another one, it's called The Heavens Declare the Glory of God. And another one is called Prophetic Constellations.
do you have the full presentation on like a YouTube or
I don't, but I have the full presentation on PowerPoint, and I'm glad to share with anybody. And also, I'm really glad and grateful for people who can reach out and maybe clarify some stuff. You guys do some research, you know, learn anything. I would like to hear about it because, you know, my
Okay.
research was limited.
Here's I'll come around on this.
All
side.
right.
You stay right here. Okay, it's kind of a comment question. I have come to learn that the stars and planets aligned to make the Star of Bethlehem at the time of Christ's birth. The stars announced the birth of God's son, Christ. Anything about the birth of Christ, the Star of Bethlehem
So,
that we talk about? Do
so-
you have any
so
thoughts on that?
I have a program where I can actually go back and actually see. So Joseph Smith actually prophesied of this. Moroni, where was it? Section 121, verse 30-ish. Somewhere in that area where Joseph Smith talks about in the last days, we'll be able to know the cycles of the stars and the planets and all the planetaries, and we'll know when they're going to rise and when they're going to set, and we're going to know. He prophesied that we would get that information. Well, I have a program that I can now go back. I can say, hey, well, what did the stars look like the second that I was born? I was born at this time. What did the stars look like at that point? You see what I'm saying? So I can take it back or forward as far as I want. You see what I'm saying? And yeah, we don't know exactly what day Christ was born, but we do have different times where actual stars lined up to actually make brighter stars in the skies in those kinds of times. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a little more to
There's
this.
a little bit more here, more of a comment. And then do you have one that came online?
Came up from Zoom, yeah.
Okay, it's from Zoom. Okay, at Christ's death, there was an eclipse that caused the world to be dark. At Christ's death, God has set the stars and what? Planets, thank you. To tell the story of Christ. I think
Okay.
you would agree with that,
Yeah.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And then we have, why don't we get yours here from Zoom?
All right. So, have you read the books by Anthony Larson, a prophecy series? If not, I would recommend these books are deal with this subject. I have not read those. So Anthony Larson, I will check that out.
Okay, good. Okay, one last one here. The branch comes up a lot in the descriptions. I noticed that as well. It seems to mean Jesus the Christ. Any other insights that to that description or others?
Yeah, so it's interesting that the stars actually don't repeat their names that much, right? So in other words, if you look at stars, you do have like 2 or 3 stars that are called Deneb, actually, right? And that means the judge. But on the branch, it's funny because they're actually come in different languages. So there's only one of them, Spica, which means the branch, that actually directly means the branch in that language. But then the other ones are like from Chinese and from Mayan or from whatever. So they have these different names from these different stars. When I think of Christ, I mean, the branch to me, that is just, it's representing Christ. It's giving you the idea of who that person is.
The branch.
Yeah.
And then the Lion of Judah.
And the Lion of Judah at the end.
Beautiful.
So,
All
okay.
right.
All right.
That was absolutely fantastic. So interesting. Thank you for that. Okay, we're going to take a little bit of a break. Maybe let's say about 7 minutes or so. We'll take a break. The restrooms again are downstairs, and stretch your legs, go outside if you want to get some fresh air, and we'll be back here shortly.